All right, we are here back at it with episode 26 of the Trilogy Lacrosse Theater, and we're very excited to have Scott Ratliff here with us.
And my dog Leo, who it sounds like is going to be barking at us for at least part of this this program.
Featuring Leo, we've occasionally had guest features, and so glad that Leo can make that guest feature. Scott, where are you logging in from?
I am in Atlanta, Georgia, in Midtown. Beautiful Atlanta.
Awesome. Did you move to Atlanta when you were really young, or were you born in Atlanta?
I was born in Orange County, California. I lived there till in a town called Dana Point till I was 5, and then I grew up here in Atlanta. So this is very much home.
Do you have memories of Dana Point, California?
I have memories.
What is that outside of?
It's Orange County. So it's,
got it. Sorry. Okay.
In the Newport, Laguna Beach kind of area. I feel like I have memories of being there when I was a kid, but I think most of them are probably just going back and visiting. Even still, most of my family's in San Diego area, so that's kind of always been where we spent Christmases and summers growing up. And then my sister just moved out there now, so I spend a lot of time out there. So that it does still have a bit of home number 2 feel, but Atlanta is definitely the spot. I'm sorry.
We're just gonna roll with it.
He's gonna stop eventually. He's just a little worked up. I just got home.
A child will probably pass through somewhere, or there'll be some sort of noise out here. So I think this is part of the COVID world that we live in. Is just the understanding and empathy around us being people in our houses
or dogs.
Dogs.
He needed some FaceTime. That was Leo's biggest gripe. He's like, "You're not even going to give me. You're going to feature me, and not give me FaceTime here."
It is true though. As long as he's being pet and getting attention, he's fine. It's just if I start ignoring him, we're going to hear from
him. Pet away.
Well, Rat, you obviously, I think probably a fair amount of people know a little bit about your story, but I think, talk a little bit about how you got into lacrosse. And for those who don't know, your dad was an All-American at Maryland. And so it was in your blood. But you lived in California, Southern California and Atlanta, which are now 2 hotbeds, but when you were coming up weren't. So how did that come about? How did you make that connection?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, my dad had and it's funny, my dad actually grew up in Georgia as well, and he moved to Baltimore when he was a freshman in high school, and so he was picked it up really late. He went to University of Maryland on a football scholarship, and then played in a summer league when he was on campus. Coach Buddy Beermore saw him and offered him a lacrosse scholarship as well, and so he made the switch and he decided to do that. And didn't end up playing football there, played 4 years lacrosse. So I was one of those kids who I had a stick before I could walk or talk. He always kind of made that a part of my life. I remember playing with him in the yard far before I ever had an opportunity to join a league or anything like that. When we moved to Atlanta, and I got to that age where you're going to start looking for a league, I think I was in 4th grade the first time I played in the league. I remember driving around the city. There were 3 leagues in the essentially the entire state of Georgia. They were all in that kind of greater Atlanta area. And, he just went and watched the practice and kind of wanted to watch the level of play and ended up picking one called Atlanta Youth Lacrosse, which was started by a guy named Lou Corsetti, who you guys might be involved in U.S. Lacrosse and is still a great friend and mentor of mine. So that was kind of how it went down. And in that league at the time, there were 4 teams. And my dad, was one of the few guys who we got involved there and started coaching. And the rest was history. Lacrosse, high school lacrosse just became certified in Georgia or whatever you want to call it, recognized by the GHSA right at the time it was wrecked. It was starting at that point. And by the time I got to high school, but it was still very much a startup sport. But I had a full-time coach and a playing partner in my house, which was certainly helpful.
And when you're there, but you leave for Loyola, and then you kind of come back. I know you obviously came back for summers and like that, but did you have like a moment where you kind of had to like slap yourself, like, well, wait a second, like this is like lacrosse is like now a thing? Was it like always kind of like gradual, or was there one kind of moment that sticks out where you're like, are we like a southern hotbed? Like what happened?
Yeah, no, that definitely happened. Well, first, Loyola was complete culture shock.
Yeah.
Like it was, I can't begin to describe how clueless I was to lacrosse. Wasn't on TV really then. You know, I watched the Mikey Powell highlight tapes, and I would watch the Final Four if Maryland was in it with my dad. But like, I really truly never grew up around the sport, watching the sport. You know, my dad wasn't one who like, he doesn't really love to watch sports in general. So that wasn't like a big part of it. And I'll always remember at my like freshman orientation, our, you know, they called them the evergreens, like the student liaison that, you know, shows you around your first week, referred to me as a lax bro. And I truly had never heard the term in my life. And it's like, I've learned that I very much probably did fit the mold, especially at that point in my life. But so that was weird, was first getting there and being in an environment where everybody recognized and knew lacrosse and it had a culture. Like in my high school, it was kind of the misfits. It was like, you didn't really have a team culture. We didn't really all hang out together. It was kind of a ragtag bunch. So then the seeing it grow in Atlanta, I think the big like eye-opening jump was after I came home. When I graduated college, I lived in New York City for about a year and a half. When I got home from there and club lacrosse had, you know, became a thing, and I was working with LB3. There was another organization, Thunder, which is now combined into one, and both of those groups were putting out, you know, high-level teams with like multiple kids recruiting to play at a high level. That was like the eye-opening moment for me when I got back. It's like, wow, you know, there were two of us maybe in my senior class on to play Division I college lacrosse, and then I came home and the first team I coached had like 15 Division I commits on it or something like that. So that really had shown me just how, you know, how far it's come, and it was cool, and I was proud of it.
We're talking about those Walton days. So, you know, was it like the kids who, you know, we see this in a lot of areas when they're burgeoning, is like, oh, you can't play this sport, you can't play this sport, why don't you go out and try lacrosse? Was it like a mix of that, or is it more like football kids? Because baseball is huge in Walton specifically, but in the South.
Yeah, it was both. So we had like my starting defense my junior year was a kid who went on to play linebacker at UGA, another guy who went on to play defensive end at Stanford. So we had these like two absolute stud football players. The kid who went to Stanford had Division I lacrosse offers as well. I mean, he was really a freak, made it all the way to the NFL. But then we had that. We had myself, who was obviously super committed to the sport and one of the better players. And then something to do, you know, mom made me pick a sport. My dad didn't coach my high school team, but he used to get really frustrated with that because the football guys were just doing it to stay in shape and to have fun. They didn't really seem to care too much. And then the kind of that other group of guys just didn't really have that like competitive fire or toughness about them. It was really just like a hobby. A super over competitive, emotional young version of myself to navigate like playing in that environment. And, you know, here I am crying after we lose games, and other guys are, you know, frankly could care less what the results were a lot of times.
And you played, when did you make the switch to LFM? Because you played midfield with a short stick for a majority of your high school career, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I started dabbling with the long pole. That's what my dad had played. And looking back now, I realize like he had no idea how to teach me how to play shorty. You know, I cradled with my hands at the bottom of the stick, and so the stick was up. He always taught me to keep it up here above my head, and you know, so my stick protection was terrible. And like when I'm spin moves, I was out here all the time, and so I would mess around with the long pole like in 8th grade and 9th grade. But I was always one of the only kids on my team that could catch and throw. So it was a waste to stick me at defense. You know, we can't score any goals or run any plays. So I played midi up until my junior year of high school. And summer going into my junior year, I started going to camps and things like this. And I would always play pole at camps. I wasn't really the most athletic kid. I was a, you know, late bloomer and hit puberty late. I was small, and my high school football coach used to call me a giant slow twitch muscle fiber. I was just not fast. I had
like the longest nickname ever, by the way.
Yeah, and really, like, when I look back at it, like, really hurtful, you know? We looked up to that guy. But
It's like
I
the
worked
longest, most specific nickname ever, too. It's like
Every time someone learns something, they're like slow twitch muscle fiber.
yeah, it doesn't really think about it. Yeah, it was tough, but it was true. I was a long distance runner, so I was in shape, but I wasn't really that fast or quick. And my dad recognized that, and I give him a lot of credit. He was always really honest with me. He was just like, "You don't look like a Division I midfielder. Like, I just don't think that that's realistic. So when we go play in these camps, you know, why don't we have you play close defense and play long pole?" And then he started teaching me defense, and the fundamentals he taught me there were so much better than what I had been taught offensively. You know, he's telling me to keep your stick in people's guts. He's working with me on shuffling and backpedaling. He was like really big weight room guy, as you can maybe see from his legs in the picture here. So he got me in the weight room and starting to get stronger at a young age. So I would come back to my high school team and I would play a little bit of both starting my junior year. I'd play close defense. Then we had this kind of program where the last 2 minutes of every quarter, I would switch and play short stick and try to just give us a little burst on offense at the end of quarters. And then I would play man up with a short stick as well. And obviously, if the man up ended, I'd stay on. So I found quite a bit of time out there with both sticks. But it was never long stick midi. It was close defense and guard the best attackman, or it was, you know, play two-way midi with a short pole in the middle of the field. And I loved it. I wish I could still do it now. It was a fun way to get introduced to the sport.
We got to give Randy Ratliff some love here. Look at this with one hand walking the dog.
Oh yeah,
it's going. These cleats look like Pumas possibly. It's amazing.
Yep, I've had lots of coaches ask me when I was going to grow up and look like him, and I'm about to be 29. I'm still waiting.
You got to get that fast twitch muscle fiber going a little bit.
He looks jacked. He's lean. Like he's got a lot of fast twitch going on there. Or at least my understanding of what fast twitch muscles are. I might also be just one giant slow twitch muscle as well.
I think you might be, actually, RB. I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah. No, it's all right.
So when you're going through this, you're taking it dead serious. You're starting to go to camps, and obviously, I would imagine that Maryland had to be, you know, at the top of your list growing up, with your dad being your hero and probably shaping a lot of what you want to do. Is that accurate, that Maryland was where you wanted to be to start?
Totally. It was, I think I could go back to probably first grade. I said, I'm going to be a 2-time All-American, a 2-time captain at University of Maryland. Like, there was no other goal in my life, which at times showed up in the classroom and probably some other places where I could have defined some bigger goals, but that was it. I mean, I admired him. I looked up to him. And I think that's what you get when you've had a family member who's done it. You know, you see a lot of people in lacrosse who, had parents that played, or maybe an older brother that played at a high level. And so, like, despite being from Georgia and maybe all the things in my life that were telling me it wasn't possible, I had this guy in my house who had done it. And, I felt like I could, be as good or better than he was. And of course, my parents kind of pumped that self-belief in me. So that was definitely always my dream, was to play at University of Maryland, to go there. And, and I was close. I got to the point where when I was starting to enter in the recruiting process, because of who my dad was and the relationships he had there, they did look at me. And it was Dave Cottle was the head coach at the time. And, he still probably holds a bigger grudge there than I do. I certainly always kind of kept that chip on my shoulder just around being told no, but like most schools didn't even give me the time of day, where they did, go out of their way. They watched me play multiple times. And then Coach Cottle gave me honest feedback. He looked at me and said, I think you're good. I think you're more of a fit in a mid-major school. And, that was what it was. But my dad, anytime that I ever play a Coach Cottle, Coach Cotton, which, I have for a lot of my pro career, my dad always reminds me that he told me no. So I know it still gets under my dad's skin.
Yeah, that mid-major, I'm sure that mid-major school was posted right in your locker when you guys played them in the national championship 2012, right?
Yeah, there's more stories there that we'll probably get into. So I got to get him going so he stops barking at us. Can we pause for 5 seconds here?
No problem at all. Pause it. All right, that's the first executed pause and start of a recording. So we'll see how this goes. It might be a good spot to insert a commercial break if we get the podcast fully.
Good idea. Good
Always
idea.
fun to hear.
Selling
Uh,
some
so how did you end up at Loyola? What was Coach Toomey? Obviously, saw something. It wasn't Durgel at that point, right? It was still Toomey.
No, it was Toomey, and Cottle wasn't referring specifically to Loyola in the mid-major statement. He was more just generalizing where he felt like I would land, which probably had most to do with my size, which is again why I didn't really take it so hard, because I was like, you know what, this kind of makes sense. And when I was playing at recruiting events and looking around, I wasn't the best player there. Like even I was good, but not stand out like should be going to a top 10 school type of guy. So
well, that Maryland defense, that mold of the Maryland defense is. I mean, it's the Brian Farrell, the McGills, like big, like huge guys. So I could see he's not the prototype,
Right. When I met him, and I'm taking away from your other question, I apologize. When I met him the first time face to face, I remember my dad had me stuff like folded socks into my shoes so that I would stand up a couple inches higher when I went to talk to him face to face. But obviously, that didn't work out either.
He made you go barefoot. No.
Randy Ratliff is just the hype man of all hype men here. I mean, socks in the shoes, reminding about anytime you play a Cottle team. I mean, it's amazing.
It's subtle because it's really not my dad's like style to do that. I mean, he doesn't give me feedback since I've been in 9th grade. He hasn't really attempted to coach me one time. He is the ultimate, just supportive, proud of you. You're better than I ever was. I mean, that's all I ever hear, except for whatever reason when Cottle's involved. Then I get specific feedback of needing to play harder or needing to do something else. So I know where I get kind of my edge from. He always talked about be the meanest person on the field and the nicest person off, and that's something I took to heart for my entire life. But to Mitch's question, to me, that came about from my high school coach. A guy named John Holthouse. I had two, Tim Pritz and John Holthouse, who were both really, really influential in my young lacrosse career. I was so lucky. There were not many high school programs in the state that had really strong coaching. And Walton, we weren't one of the best teams at the time that I was there, but we did have two of the best coaches down here. And Coach Holthouse had played at Loyola. He was roommates with Toomey when he was there. And I was committed to go to NAPS. I had another high school club coach who had played at Navy who kind of helped to open those doors. And obviously with the prep school piece of it and just with the locker room size at Navy that they're allowed to take, I think he was able to kind of convince him to take a chance on me, that Richie Meade that was. So I'm all geared up and set to go to NAPS. And I entered into my senior high school season. In the first 4 or 5 games, like I was just dominating. I was, doing what I said. I was playing close defense and shutting guys down, literally running to the box, switching sticks, getting the ball, scoring on offense. And I think my 2 high school coaches were just really sold like, hey, he can play. And they saw my work ethic and how I was treating it off the field. So he was in Toomey's ear quite a bit. And Toomey had seen me play one time. He came down to Atlanta to run a clinic, and we did like a little showcase game of like 2 of the better club teams in Atlanta. And I felt like I dominated that game. I mean, he has told me since that he didn't really remember watching me on the field at all. But he remembered me staying after and helping clean up. It was at my high school. And so he was like, and then Coach Holthouse is in my ear about you for 5 straight weeks. I did have this memory of you being high character. Like that stood out to me, you staying behind and cleaning up. So ultimately Loyola had a kid who didn't make the test scores to get in. So they had, an open roster spot. It was April of my senior year. I was driving home from spring break down in Florida, and he called and was like, "Hey, we don't have any scholarship money, but the spot's yours if you want it." And I had visited Loyola's campus, never done like an official visit or anything like that. But my parents and I drove around there, and for me, I wanted to play at the highest level. I didn't want to go to prep school. I thought I was ready to play right away. I loved my coach, Coach Holthouse. He told me, "Hey, I think you'll enjoy it here socially and everything else." So it could have been, Mars University. I was gonna go where anybody would have me that was playing, what I perceived to be high level college lacrosse. So I kind of just chanced into that one, but it worked out really well, obviously.
Do you still like pinch yourself just in terms of like whether it was just sheer once in a million luck, or like do you kind of believe in some sort of like the stars aligned for me and I was supposed to go there? Like I don't want to be too heavy handed, but it's also like what are the odds that happens? Like,
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with that, man. I don't know.
yeah,
My kind of nature is to more lean towards the stars align kind of thing. I mean, I just, I think that even when we don't realize it, typically life kind of works in our favor. And, there was clearly for me a reason to kind of end up there. And it was,
Yeah.
I mean, it was hard. Even making the decision not to go to Navy, when you do make a commitment to an academy,
Yeah.
you swell of pride in that decision. And so I had never really dreamed of the military being a path for me. I was a really disciplined kid in high school. So like it fit from that kind of standpoint. But I also like, and I can look back and admit this, like I had forced the idea of service onto myself because of the opportunity to play lacrosse. And when I got that call from Coach Toomey, in my heart, I knew right away what I wanted to do. The harder part of that was like talking to my dad, who was super supportive, but also, Loyola's $50,000 a year and Navy's free. And obviously, the academy education and what that can provide you and all that. So that was like a challenging time in my life to make a decision. And my mom just, told me to trust yourself and trust your gut. And, don't feel like Dad and I know what's best for you. You know what's best for you. And that advice was meaningful. And my gut was really obvious to me at that point. So I did trust it. And, I thought that I was going to a lesser lacrosse program. Again, not growing up, like watching lacrosse. I'd never heard of Loyola. Like I couldn't have told you who Tim Gettleman was or Matt Dwan or Charlie Toomey. Like this was all, I mean, I even remember when I showed up on campus, I couldn't have said who, Cooper McDonnell and Steve Lane were our best players. Like I'd never heard of them. I'd never watched the game. I didn't know anything about it. But what I did know is that, my gut told me to go there. And my first game of my college career, we beat Navy in overtime. And I think that was like a stars aligned moment right off the bat where I was like, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And obviously I was really enjoying the school experience as well. So I don't know how that happened, but I'm glad it did.
Well, you went from April of your senior year, planning on going to NAPS, to 2012, 2013 being captain, two-time All-American, just like you had set out to. How long, that 2 years of freshman and sophomore year, how much of an adjustment? I mean, you heard the term Laxboro for the first time, your first week there. How quickly did that ramp you up and kind of get you acclimated to what you were doing in that program?
Yeah, well, I think of the first 2 years were learning experiences in different ways. Without going into too much detail, like my freshman year, I had some issues off the field. A lot of the guys in my class did, and we got in too much trouble, and I probably was making decisions that weren't the best ones, and wasn't really representing myself, frankly, like just as a human the way I wanted to. And so I think just got caught up into going from like being in a high school where the football stars at my high school were big man on campus, and like people, half the school didn't know what lacrosse was. I mean, truly. So now to be at a school where it was like lacrosse players were put on this pedestal, and I'm 18 years old and this is happening for the first time. So I think my freshman year was really just about learning to kind of find humility, figure out my moral compass a little better, who I wanted to be, who I wanted to become, and I went through some trials and tribulations, frankly, mainly off the field. I mean, I was having success on the field. I was getting playing time. I was on man down right off the bat. I ended up starting the last couple games of our season and our tournament games. So like the on the field stuff clicked, and we had a really good team my freshman year with really good leadership. We ended up losing in triple overtime to Cornell in the NCAA tournament. They went on to the Final Four that year. Army had upset Syracuse. So like we would have gotten Army in the second round. So we were close, like, to being a Final Four team my freshman year. And we had a ton of seniors and all that. So I came back my sophomore year, much more mature, worked my butt off all off season. Like on the field, I was ready to be a leader. I was ready to be one of the better players on the team. I also think that I was ready off the field to not make, repeat some of those same mistakes. And I'd started to kind of find my rhythm and my comfort zone in campus life and all those things. But we had a really tough season, and we, one of the worst seasons Loyola's ever had, actually. And we lost like some really bad games that year. And so from that standpoint, it was really challenging. And even though I had become one of the better players already, I wasn't ready to be like a vocal leader and to like help to change a culture. I was still very much following some of the older guys and things like that. And I say I think this applied for a lot of my classmates, which ended up being, we had something like 5 seniors and 13 juniors when we won the championship. So a lot of the kind of leadership and talent was in my class. And a lot of us that sophomore year, although we were first line middies and we were on the field making plays, we were silent in locker rooms and we weren't kind of setting a culture. So that was the big takeaway from my sophomore year. First year was get my bearings, figure my off the field stuff out. Sophomore year was get that valuable experience and also just kind of learn what we didn't want a season and a culture to be like. And then junior year, I showed up ready to go. I knew I was going to be a captain. I knew I was going to be one of the best players. We all as a group kind of knew we weren't going to make some of these same mistakes that we had been making. And that's where it all just kind of clicked, not just for me, but for all of us.
Yeah.
So
you guys.
This is a PowerPoint presentation, Mitch? Is that the opening slides?
I give what the YouTube gods give me, or take what the YouTube gods give me, and this is what I got here. So this is from the 2012 season, at least according to the YouTube caption on it. But
that was the Randy Ratliff cradle above the head there.
Exactly. But see, with the long stick, that works. If I had been told, Ryan, to cradle with my hand on the plastic, I would still be playing offensive midfield. I mean, it was literally that simple of just like he never told me to move my top hand up.
Real quick, you now have a signature celebration. This didn't make the cut, huh? Is this Tebowing?
Yeah, but this was in Denver, and this was the year that Tebow was like going crazy on the Broncos. So it was very specific celebration. Yeah,
because I feel like this video is going to showcase you like really testing the waters with different celebrations over the course.
They used to get mad at me at Loyola, Coach, and I had a Zoom with our Loyola team the other day, and Coach still brought up how much he hated that Tebow celebration. I'm like, I bet you hated it. I got a nice raise after that season, so you probably couldn't pay it. So no, but obviously this year was really cool, and that goal against Denver was in our conference tournament to win the game, which was I had given up the game-winning goal 3 days prior to Johns Hopkins, and it was our only loss of the season. So to get to bounce back the very next game, get to score one of myself was a really meaningful moment for me in my career. And this team was just so fun to play with. You ran on 4-on-3s and you threw it to Mike Sawyer, and he scored every single time. And
about Mike Sawyer, he was automatic that year.
It was really
you guys had some shooters. There's one. That's some good range there, Rat. Is that a little high bouncer?
High to low.
You probably choke up more on your shot than most poles I know. Is that from playing midfield? Is that just what you're comfortable with? What's the reasoning there?
Yeah, I think I choke up on my stick in general when I play, just for control. I mean, I watch Brody Merrill and where he puts his hands in it. And, that's really who I tried to emulate. Or Joel White was the guy I was watching in college. He was 3 years older than me. So the shooting part of it, honestly, Mitch, I'm just not that big. Like you look at like Jared Newman or Mike Earhart, and they're they step in and throw it 115 miles an hour with their hands at the bottom of the stick. Like, I can't do that, So I choke up because I think I can get a little bit more power by taking a little bit of the stick out of it. I have a great partner in STX, but I ask for the lightest stick they can possibly give me. Like I'm talking like, give me the stick you make for 10-year-olds, and I'll deal with it if it breaks. But I need all the help I can get to get power on those outside shots.
Oh, look at
wow,
that!
Look at that baby face.
Young
look
rat
at that baby
there.
face.
Let's get another look at that press conference here. So who were some of the other studs on this 2012 team? Obviously, you had Hawkins.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Fletcher. Joe Fletcher was a sophomore, and he was our lockdown kind of close defenseman. Justin Ward at X and Lusby and Sawyer kind of drove the offense.
Lusby was MVP. He was most outstanding player, right, from that championship weekend.
Smart Park guy.
He couldn't miss, and he was like, for whatever reason, he just was like always open. Like they would slide from him, but then like there would never be a second slide. Like I recall watching this game that he was just like he was always open, and he did not miss like that entire weekend.
Well, I think that was because of Mike. Mike Sawyer was the best player on our team all season, and so when we got to the Final Four or to the quarterfinals, so much of the defense was built towards we would just run mumbos both ways, and everybody was just paying attention to Mike's side, and it just opened Eric up. And then Eric also, he started doing stuff in the Final Four that we had never seen him do in 4 years. Like he's like pulling people, and like it was like, you know, he worked his butt off, and he kind of went unconscious in that last weekend. And you know, I always tell people, I think it speaks to how good of a teammate Mike was. Though, is it's easy to say like, oh, I support my teammates, but we're all, you know, we have ego, especially if you're as good as he is. And he didn't say beep in the Final Four when he had something like 2 goals in those 2 games after leading us all season, but he just recognized, like, here's what's happening. You know, I'm getting a lot of attention paid to me. Lusby's opening up and it's working. So that was kind of the nature of that team all season. And I think what made it so fun to be a part of was our coaches. You know, a lot of people talk about Brown in 2015 or whatever it was, kind of being like that running gun style. But, you know, I really thought we were, unless you want to go back to, you know, way back in the day when kind of everybody played that way. I thought we were one of the first to really revolutionize like playing up tempo. And they just made it very clear when we got there that, hey, you know, if we get beat in time of possession by 20 minutes, but we outshoot a team, we're good with that. So the only stat we paid attention to was shots. And, you know, I remember in 2012, our first game against Delaware, we didn't win by as much as maybe we could have, but we had like 50 shots to their like 26. And I think we all realized, like, okay, when you have Mike Sawyer and Eric Lusby and you're getting 50 shots, like there's a good chance that we're going to have success here. So they really let us run free. They let their long pole shoot lefty on the run shots and playoff games. And
a split dodge. It's not even a clean break. I think that's a slow break split dodge.
But it sure made it fun to be a part of, and it made us practice with more energy, like doing something different and knowing that we weren't going to have people every time I took a shot that was a bad shot. I wasn't going to have to come to the sideline and be told, like, what a huge mistake or what are you doing? Like, they let us play and they trusted us. And it really, like I said, it made it super fun to be a part of.
Well, by the way, they just showed a shot a little while ago of you guys at the Loyola Stadium, cars everywhere, you guys playing Hopkins. And now here we are. They just slipped in Boston versus Hamilton. This is at McMaster College. There couldn't have been more than a dozen fans in this.
55-yard line. 55-yard line. You gotta make sure you're on your toes.
Nice little slip kick, and the crowd goes wild.
My second goal of my pro career, and RB, guess who threw it to me?
Oh, I mean, you and Will, I think, is something pretty special. And the fact that you guys still get to play, you know, with each other now and the PLL. I think it's so cool, kind of having that guy that you came in with, right? And in terms of, and I think you guys again kind of lucked out in terms of who you came in with, in terms of someone that high character, hard worker, like to be able to like kind of bounce ideas off of, like, what do you like? I'm sure that the fact that you guys came in together, that relationship has been tremendous and so helpful as you guys have both kind of progressed with you know, across your careers.
It's really amazing how many, like, if I were to, you know, clip a highlight tape of all my professional points, even not being teammates with Will for 4 years, it's still like 80% of them he's involved in. I mean, it was like years we weren't playing together, it was all-star games or like Team USA events and things like that. And, you know, that relationship has been huge for me as a pro, but like, there's just no, you know, I've never had Hawkins would be probably the only other one that comes to mind, but just having like an on-field trust and connection with somebody that, you know, we really just, you know, I know where he's going to be. And I think my favorite thing, and I know this used to kill you back in the day, but like will throw me the ball even if I'm not open. And he pumped self-belief into his teammates in that way, though. I mean, Davey Emila was a guy the year after, you know, you retired and had really never even played pro. And before the season, Will's telling him for 40 goals. And I remember being like, who is Davey? Like, what like, chill, Will. But then he, you know, you get out there and Will's chucking the ball at you and he's and trusting you in that way. And it empowers you to believe in yourself a little bit more. So I think he has improved drastically in his turnover margin. And I'm sure he'd be the first to do that. But knowing when I cut that the ball is coming, it helped. You know,
I'm all for building up confidence, and you guys created, you know, quite the synergy or quite the chemistry. I was just like, in the first year, I was just like, I don't think either of you know what you're doing, and so the fact that both of you are making these decisions, maybe let's temper this down a little bit. We don't need to do a give and go on a 4-on-4 break every time, or especially after we just put a long defensive possession. Like we don't need to do the give and go every single transition situation. That's all. We could do it some, but just not every time.
Yep, I hear you. And I would just defer blame to Will. I'd be like, just because I cut doesn't mean he has to throw it. Like he's the attack man.
And also, with the TV timeouts, I mean, really, you got to break every 5 minutes. So come on, we can do it.
I didn't really break out like offensively in the 2 years I played with you, Ryan. Before year 3, obviously we still had Mitch, but I do remember one time I tried I'd watched Joel White score like a diving behind the cage goal, and I was just like, this is a dream of mine. Like I want to score one of these goals in my life. So I remember trying one week and I missed. I don't know if it got saved or I just missed cage. And I just stand up and I'm like a little nervous at what you're going to be saying to me. And first person I make eye contact with is RB, and you just gave me kind of like okay. And I was like, all right, that could have gone worse.
We'll talk about that transition from Loyola to pro. When you were starting to wrap up your Loyola career, did you have an idea of like, I definitely want to continue professional lacrosse? Was it something that like, I'll give this a try? Did you have a career lined up off the field when you're coming out of school?
Yeah, so truly, like, it had never crossed my mind until after we won the championship. And back then, the draft was before your senior season. It was like in the January or something of when you were a senior. So like, I can't stress enough. It just never crossed my mind that I would be able to play pro lacrosse. And then when we won the championship, I read like an Inside Lacrosse article that had me as one of their like draft picks or whatever. And so I was like, oh, like maybe this is going to be a thing. Like very similar to how I ended up at Loyola. It was just out of like, okay, so now I've read that I'm going to get drafted. We go through the fall. I end up getting picked by the Cannons. I, look on the roster and see you guys and see Paul, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is pretty cool. I'm going to get to play with these guys at the highest level. But that wasn't like my career plan, right? And so I had interviewed and I ended up getting a job in banking. I worked at like a financial consulting firm in Manhattan there doing consulting for commercial banking. And so my plan was to kind of do that routine of the dual life of get into the finance world and then travel up to obviously the location of Boston, New York City worked out really well. And so that was my game plan. And I got up there, and I think your rookie season, you're still in college shape. So, I was, of course, getting my bearings and things like that. And, being on a team with Kyle Sweeney, I knew I wasn't going to get to play long stick midi. If I recall, I was kind of like the inside guy on our defense. You were still guarding, the Dodgers behind. And so I was just finding my way, but I felt confident and I felt good out there. I felt like I belonged for sure, and really enjoyed the experience. So then year 2 was where this transition like kind of slapped me in the face. Like I showed up for that second season and just, I just didn't feel fast. I didn't feel like I could do any of the things that I believed I could do. I still ended up starting every game and getting to play in every game that year, but I was, for lack of a better phrase, like I felt like I was invisible out there. I wasn't making a lot of like really positive plays to help the team. I didn't feel like I was hurting us. We weren't winning a ton of games or as many as we would have liked that season. So that was like the eye-opening year for me, where it was like, okay, I don't know that, and there's guys that can do it and they blow me away, Kevin Buchanan or John Rannigan or, that can, yourself, Mitch, frankly, that can just work the way you guys do and play in both leagues. But I just realized, like, if I'm going to become great as a professional lacrosse player, I'm going to have to commit to it full time. And, I liked well, I don't know if I liked my job in New York City, but I appreciated what I was learning and the work ethic I was gaining and some of the skill sets I was finding. And I loved the city. So that part of it was hard to leave, but I just, that same advice I talked about when I chose Loyola, it was my mom again in my ear, just saying, trust yourself. And it was my dad again saying, you better not quit that freaking banking job for a $6,000 a year salary playing for the Boston Cannons. But, I kind of just went with that same, like, I trusted my gut. I knew what I wanted. Getting introduced to guys like yourself, and even Paul at that time, I think he's really different now than he was when we were teammates originally, but just seeing somebody on my team who had created multiple people on my team who had created careers that not even if it was like, right, Paul was this lacrosse brand, you guys with Trilogy had gotten into this camp and club space. Even Kyle Sweeney, who went, the Maverick route and was involved in starting a lacrosse company. What I saw was a network of individuals who could help me to figure out a path that worked for me and allowed me to do both. So that's what I really was attracted to, because I knew if I could find some career that, was involved in the game still, that I could have a stick in my hands a lot more, that I could justify, taking a couple hours out of my day to train and things like that. So that's when I made the decision to leave the job in banking, and I moved back to Atlanta, and I got involved with Club Lacrosse as essentially a way to appease my father, that I would at least have like some guaranteed income, coming my way while I figured it out. And of course, I look back at Loyola and at that as two of the major turning point decisions in my life, where that same piece of advice of just kind of trust yourself really showed up for me, and in my opinion proved to be the right advice and the right decision in the long run.
You bring up an interesting point. That 2012 to 14 era team with the Cannons, there were a lot of guys doing lacrosse full time that are still involved in lacrosse heavily, which is pretty amazing. We talked with someone about this, Ryan. Maybe it might not have been on Trilogy Lacrosse Theater, but we were talking about how that team just had a group of guys that found niches within the sport of lacrosse and in sports in general. It's awesome to hear that did trickle down and in some of the decision making of the younger guys.
Well, it was the same with Manny. I mean, Will took a job with Bank of America the same time I did, and so we really again went on a shared path. And then with similar pressure from his parents, he went to grad school and coached, and he coached with Pasque, who was on our team and was coaching at Wagner. So him and I both equally kind of tiptoed our way from the corporate America traditional path into realizing okay, we can make this work. And of course, I moved home to Atlanta and I started training full time, and I came back year 3 and I had probably the best season of my life. And then
and here it is. Look at that, right on cue. You queued it up perfectly. 2015, your third year in the league at 13-14, and then we get the signature Ratliff glass punch, right?
Yeah, it's the heartbreaker. Yeah.
So that was that all the time spent at home in Atlanta was just perfecting different celebrations. You're in the lab, maybe left and then right.
The high school practices are a good place to perfect celebration. The heartbreaker came from my roommate at the time, who was a big hockey fan, and he was a Blackhawks fan. And Pat Kane does this thing where he goes down on the knee and draws the heart. So he was in my ear about, if you score, do it. And I use this as an example of showing kids how habits, are so important, because the first heartbreaker I ever did, I didn't do it until I almost got to the box, because it wasn't a habit. I hadn't thought about it. And then his voice came in my head, heartbreaker, and I did it. Then all of a sudden you score a few goals and you start doing it more and more. And now this season I was all right, I'm not going to do the heartbreak anymore. It's time to mature in here and not celebrate. And I can't help myself. It goes in, and my natural instinct is just to do it. And then after I'm I'm incapable of doing anything else anymore.
Well, talking about instincts, this place particular, see if I can get back to it. There's one from the All-Star game where you, myself, and Max, we were teammates, and we're in the All-Star game down in Houston, and he was on a fast break, and you came down and you had a diving check to knock the ball away from his stick. I think you broke his thumb in that, and it was the All-Star game. I think, did I miss it already? Do you remember what I'm talking about? There it is.
Right there.
Yeah, that's the play right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Max was too happy that you took him out. But that's just that's how you play. That's how you work, and it becomes a habit, right?
Yeah, and it's what I wouldn't be an all-star if I didn't play like that. That's the point. You're out there to showcase the fact that you shoot too. Is what got me here is that I sprint all over the field. So I'm supposed to show what I do well. That's the whole point of the game, in my opinion. So that was a memorable play because he was so fast, and so I love the fact that even though he was jogging, I love the fact that I had a chance to run him down. And yeah, he was mad at me, says I hurt his thumb, but he didn't any time, so it was fine.
This goal right here is one of my all-time favorites. Out in Mile High. I don't remember if this is a 4th of July game. Probably not. I think the crowd's, but this little Will Manny backdoor alley-oop is still, I think, one of my all-time favorites.
Will and I talk about it often. I think this is probably my favorite play ever as well. And again, this goes back to if I had time to think about that, I mean, what a terrible decision probably to throw that pass. But you know, that I just have that trust in Will. Like if I see that it's not even seeing him, and this is what Will does. I mean, if you look right here too, like what he does better than anybody else is he flashes his stick where he wants you to throw it. And so like I don't look for him. I see him like right here, put his stick out in front, and then I just throw it there. And it was the same thing on that backdoor cut. I remember my goal was to dodge Drew and score, and he landed a pretty good jam. And just out of the corner of my eye, I just see Will's stick like up in the air on a back cut, and I just throw the ball towards his stick. And you know, way more so than me, like he doesn't ever let me down. When I throw it to him, he scores. So I'm gonna keep doing that.
And this is some ridiculous feeds, and to your point, like, I guess, where did that come from? Where did that instinct, was it playing other sports? Was it back to your kind of midfield days in high school? Is that where that vision and feeding ability came from?
Yeah, but basketball. I was
Basketball.
in basketball, and that was always that was my sport. Frankly, for a long time, I wanted it to be my best sport, but lacrosse overtook it a little bit there. But I think that's definitely where that comes from. I think I was a pretty good passer in basketball, and so I understand where guys are going to slip to and where the feeding lanes are and things like that. And I mentioned it before, but I've been lucky to score a lot of goals, but I don't really think I'm a great shooter. I think I'm a pretty good finisher inside. But like I've got to be in good situations to score from the outside where the goalies are moving and things like that. Like if goalies have a chance to just track me stepping into a shot, I don't shoot at a terribly high percentage. So just knowing that about my game, like Will shoots a lot better than I do. So I'm just always of the mindset of pass first. And I think the advantage you get with a long pole is people aren't used to it. Even if the scouting report on me says like, treat him like a midi, there's still this instinct of if somebody sees me crow hop, a lot of guys just freeze and they think, oh, we're going to watch him launch a 2-pointer.
And here it is right here. You can see that, right? People are unsure of how to approach you right there. And you keep the super high cradle going.
Exactly. So, I try to use that to my advantage, and I love to feed out of that crow hop. And again, Will, the thing I love about him as a player is he never, a lot of guys, like if you look right there, when I'm coming down the alley, Will's going to the pipe. And a lot of attackmen I've played with will start to fade to X and not be like a scoring threat. He plays right behind his defender's head. And so I think part of the reason I find him so often is because I'm just looking to pass to anybody. And he always makes himself an option in a danger spot. And so that makes him, again, easy for somebody like myself to play with. And, and then I can pick and choose when I'm wide open, like in situations like that. Or I like shooting when I'm catching the ball from the other side of the field because I know now the goalie has had to track the ball, reset himself. He might not be centered. So I'm aware of things like that of, shooting off the dodge probably isn't my biggest strength, or just like carrying the ball into a shot, but drawing attention and moving it or shooting it off of feeds from other people from the other side of the field are when I've had most of my success.
And having that 2015 successful season where you start feeling good, was it the following summer where the Blaze it was 2016, right? Where the Blaze came about, and that I got to imagine, I remember like seeing that and being like, well, we lost Rat, and being bummed from a teammate perspective, from a, offensive threat perspective, but at the same time being like, it's got to happen, right? For the sport, for you, like for the city, like it's got to happen. And so when that came to fruition, what were your feelings about that? And was there any conflicted feelings, or were you like, I have to do this?
Yeah, I mean, they were conflicted. We were so good in 2015. We were so close. We lost that overtime game, to go to the championship. And I think there was part of me that was a little naive to just how hard winning is. I won my junior year of college, and then my third year of the MLL, we have this great season. We almost win again. So in my mind, I'm like, well, easy. Like, I just recreate this. Like, wherever I go, we'll win by year 3. It's been proven to me already twice. So I was able to, again, I was back home coaching. And at that point, I was full blown. Like, I was out on the field every day. Like, I don't think there was a kid in Atlanta between 2014 and 2017 that played lacrosse that I didn't coach. And it had become such a big part of my life that, I wanted to take that opportunity to kind of like try to help bring the pro game there and try to be an ambassador of it. And I felt like it would be a major miss if, they were playing and I wasn't a part of it at that point. Will, all of my teammates were really supportive besides Will. He was frustrated with me, which at the time, I just shot him down and was like, give me a break. Our friendship goes beyond this, blah, blah, blah. He moved on from it. But like looking back, I think, if pro lacrosse was where it is now, then I don't know that I make that decision. And knowing what I know now, but yeah, at the time it just felt like it was the obvious thing for me to do. And, it's funny, I haven't won a playoff game since college. So I now, going into year 8, have very new perspective over just how rare it is to get to be a part of a team like that and have everything click. And, I feel that way about my team right now, but we still have to get out there and prove it.
And while Mitch runs these highlights, I think that to the naive point or the naivety, I think I went through the kind of a similar thing when my team got disbanded, I guess. You don't realize how, like, the thing that you talked about, Will, in terms of the trust that was built, like, you don't really realize how much of it is relationship driven, actually, and not just like a talent thing. Like, you could throw a bunch of talent together, but like going through adversity, having challenges, frankly, like losing together, but also like understanding how hard you got to work to win, sacrifices you're gonna make. Like you kind of throw this, like,
each other, right? You got to trust,
like you get thrown on these new teams. You're like, and you're like, I don't know who these guys are. And then you kind of forget, like, wait, I haven't like built any like sweat equity with them. Like, they don't know what I've done. And like, I've got to like reprove myself kind of all over again to these guys.
Definitely. And Atlanta, those 3 seasons were some of the most challenging of my athletic career. And, part of what made that decision so easy for me, which you may or may not remember, Mitch, was, Coach Tucker, before I left, they had let Coach Tucker go, or he decided to take the job in Atlanta. And, he was really important to me at that time. And like, had just had this breakout season. And I felt like I had a ton of trust in him and he had that in me. And then, my best friend outside of Will on that team was Adam Gittleman. And we protected Jordan Burke and let Adam Gittleman go. And so I knew he was going to be in Atlanta. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, I got Coach Tuck and I got Gitz and myself, and we can start with this kind of similar leadership core. But that didn't really work out so well. Coach Tuck ended up getting fired 4 games into our first season in Atlanta. And we went through all sorts of adversity in a lot of different fashions down there. So again, just, there was much more than Coach Tuck and Gitz. I mean, that entire team in Boston was so close. And, we talk about my offense, and obviously the highlight tapes are all offense, but that defense we had in Boston with, yourself and Brody and Chad and myself, and it fit together so well. And, you guys knew how I played, and sometimes I was over aggressive and you were always right there on the 2 side. And I knew I could jump picks because you were flying to slips. And there was like things about the way I played that when I got to Atlanta defensively didn't work. And, we weren't all on the same page. And I was jumping picks and chasing guys all over the field, but behind me, they weren't prepared for it. So it was a humbling experience, getting to Atlanta and kind of seeing how hard it really is to build it. And it wasn't like we didn't have talent. I mean, Kevin Rice, that first year in Atlanta, was going to win MVP before he tore his ACL. I mean, we still had talent, but we lost close games. And I think that's where that shows up. When you don't have that trust and that continuity, you don't win those 1-goal games, which we didn't do that in any of my 3 seasons there with the Blades.
And what was probably the brightest moment of that time with the Blaze? Because obviously, it was challenging on field, but I got to imagine getting all your friends and family to come to games and seeing the kids that you coached for years get to come and see you play had to be some of the highlights. But do you have any one moment that sticks out?
To be honest with you, and I hate to even have to frame it like this, but the team didn't do a very good job of, I don't know what you want to say, marketing themselves or integrating themselves into the community. And like, we never had a game with like a huge crowd or like, and yeah, so it was cool at first seeing the kids I coached, but by that 2nd, 3rd year, it was the same 600 people in the stadium for every game. And it almost became more disheartening than it was exciting, because we were just really struggling to sell tickets. We were on the low end of attendance all the time. And so, that piece of it was hard. And I was putting a lot of time into trying to help, generate buzz for the Blaze. And so to see that not really working was frustrating. I think, the probably the most rewarding part of the time was our last stretch. The third season, our last season there. And, at this point, Adam and I, referring to Gittleman, had just felt like we'd been through the ringer together. I mean, we went through, Coach Tucker, who we both love dearly, gets fired halfway through our first season. Then Coach Huntley, who, both of us, really, really became close with him. I spent a lot of time in those 2 years with Huntley and learning and not just lacrosse. Like, he helped me.
I mean, he unleashed you probably more so than any other coach you've had in terms of on-field liberties. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. But he also taught me how to recognize my ego and how it shows up in my game. And that it seems weird because he was leaving me on the field the entire time, which you would think would only reiterate some of my beliefs that I don't need to ever come off and things like this. But he sat down and had a lot of honest conversations with me about the differences. And again, I bring him up specifically between me and Brody, and he was like, you worry first about yourself and second about, at the time, my backup pole was Matt Hosick. And he was like, the moment you start worrying more about Matt Hosick's success than your own, you have a chance to become great. And I think that I'd always considered myself unselfish. And that's what I mentioned before. Like, I don't think acknowledging ego is, all of us who reach a super high level have it, and you have to have it. But I think there does come a certain point where, like, that chip on your shoulder mentality can only take you so far. And like, I had to take a step in terms of, I know I say I am, but am I really prioritizing winning over anything else? Or am I prioritizing my role in winning, alongside of it? And he was the first coach. And I look back now and I think Toomey tried to teach me that in different ways. But I think Huntley was the first one that really got through because of he was just frank as hell. Like, he wasn't going to mince words or like hide it. And he showed me he believed in me and cared about me, but he also really addressed some areas that he thought I could improve. And so I was so thankful for that. And then he passes away, and I was with Gittleman. We were together on a trip in Central America where we were coaching when that happened. And that was hard for me. That relationship, those 2 years, was really important to me. He had played against my dad. We had some family years when he would come into town and things like this. And so that was tough. And then, they hired Liam Banks for my third season, who I was super close with and still am. And so I was really excited about that. And we got like some new blood pumped into our team. We drafted Connor Kelly, Christian Cuccinello, who you now see are having a lot of success at the professional level. And we picked up Joe Nardella, who was from that Boston team. And we ended up, we had a bad start to the season, and then we ended up winning our 5 straight games to go into the last game of the season. And it was a win in your end game against the Outlaws. And so that was the high point of my Atlanta career, was that stretch where, like, finally it just started to click into place, and we started winning and having a lot of success. And then we ended up losing to the Outlaws in that game, who by 1 goal, and they went on to win the championship. And Connor Kelly hit what we thought was a 2-pointer to tie with like 5 seconds left, and his foot was on the line. And, this was how close we were to, possibly kind of being back in the playoffs. So, like, it was almost bittersweet. We had really strong ownership in Atlanta that third season. So it was like, we finally got the ball rolling, and then, the PLL came. And for me, it was too far gone. That was a no-brainer decision. So it stunk to have to kind of, leave something you started to feel really good about. But again, I at that point, 6 years in the MLL, I felt like I'd been through the trenches, and I was, pretty sure that I wanted to try something new.
Yeah. And what was that, talk about the first year in the PLL. Obviously you got a unique situation to play in a couple weeks, where most sports don't. But what was that situation like the first year, comparing it versus the MLL, and kind of what was promised versus what was delivered, and that whole experience? And I'll run some tape of you, obviously just playing offense the whole time.
That's all. I learned that at a young age. If you want to get in the paper, the experience was incredible. I mean, it started with training camp, and there's no one thing you can like pinpoint, but the professionalism and the organization of everything was just beyond anything I'd experienced in my 6 years of pro lacrosse. And so, I think every guy had their reasons behind what decisions they made as far as that was concerned. But for me, it was, I've established kind of if you want to call it a career. I laugh because I don't really exactly know what my job is, but I do things that people pay me for, and I feel relatively established in that. And so it wasn't like a money thing for me where it was like I felt like I needed to be paid more. It was just that I wanted the sport to grow. I've invested so much time, and when I say the sport, I mean professional lacrosse specifically. And, I just believed in the vision that Paul and Mike laid out when they presented it, and thought this is a better strategy than any I've seen to grow our game and to get more eyes on it and to get more people to become fans of lacrosse. And I think right off the bat, from training camp on through the season, they not only delivered, but exceeded on my expectations. Is that to say that there's not a single flaw, that there's not mistakes or things that maybe we could have done differently? Sure, I'm sure there are, but for the most part, and you just look at the crowds and look at the production quality of this. And I never had kids at my club practice talk to me about MLL highlights or what happened in games this weekend or things like that. And last year, I would come home and they knew every single storyline. They had listened to the mic'd up. They knew all the plus. So like it became really obvious to me to see just like the impact it made with the visibility they provided, specifically through social media. That was like the lowest hanging fruit that really frustrated me about the previous league, was just their inability to capitalize on such an obvious forum where all these kids and people eyes are. So that whole experience was amazing. And then I just got really lucky. Every bit of turmoil, whether it's COVID or anything else, I feel really, really lucky to be a part of the Archers locker room. And so beyond just going to the PLL, but getting to go on a team with a Tom Schreiber and a Marcus Holman leading the way, a guy like Matt McMahon on defense who I've loved to play with, and then to still have these guys who, I had this long built relationship and trust with in Will and in Adam Gittleman. That piece of it is just, that was a dream come true to all of a sudden be teammates with, my 5 or 6 best friends in the league. That was really, really unique and cool and made it fun.
Yeah. And the irony there is going back to like the transition from Boston to Atlanta, you feel like you're like, I got to learn all these guys and I got to reprove myself. And I think, arguably the strength of the first year was just the roster construction. And, would love to kind of get, what was your reaction when you saw it get released and you just kind of pointed out like, oh my God, 5 to 6 of my best friends are on this team. So like, what was your reaction when those rosters kind of came out? Like, certain guys were like, oh my God, I get to play with him, or like, yeah, kind of talk us through the emotional aspect.
I thought we were never going to lose a game.
Confidence at an all-time high.
I hope I'm not going to get him in trouble here, but I knew of the rosters before they came out just through my relationship with Tom, and he was working with the league and was involved in that, and he called me. Something that probably a lot of people don't know is like, a huge portion of this original Archers roster has either played together in Hawaii. I'm wearing the Wimmer Solutions shirt right now, or has like traveled internationally together in some capacity. And so that like, where like some teams had the college flair and the other things, I think people don't realize like a bunch of us have played together or have gone on these,
the globe hopping connection.
Exactly. we like to call it the give and go squad, but
that's
a plug there. But, so Tom calls me and he's like, hey, so, I'm starting this roster project and I'm curious, like, here's how we're doing it. We're trying to give familiarity. Like, who are some guys that you feel like you'd want to play with? And I didn't think I didn't want to just start naming off all these all-star players, because I guess I just hadn't conceptualized in my head, like, what 6-team league looks like and how talented each team is. So I remember being like, well, man, like, I don't want to be like prima donna about this, but like, I really want to play with Will. And I was just like, that's the one for me that like, it's really important. And he was like, well, Tom was like, well, yeah, I mean, right now I had you, me, Will, Marcus, Adam. And I was like, we can do that. So it was just excitement, like right off the bat. And then to see the full roster, and there are guys that I wasn't familiar with. We have a lot of UNC on the team. I hadn't played with a guy like Bones Kelly. Dominique Alexander was somebody I was super excited to play with. I'd kind of admired him from afar and competed against him in college. So there were parts of the team that I knew I was going to learn. The Ohio Machine defense was kind of transplanted over it. But I watched that defense play, and I said, well, you know what? Brian Karolounis and I probably have a lot in common. He plays aggressive like me, likes to take chances, throw checks. So I did suspect that I would have to adjust a little bit to maybe more of a sliding defense than I had been playing in Atlanta. But I felt like I would plug in and fit well with that group on the defensive end. And so it was really just excitement. Then obviously, as you start to assess the other teams, you realize like, okay, we're not going to win every game. Like every team's loaded. And I think that was my takeaway once the full rosters came out. And I really had a chance to look at it and realize, just how deep the talent was on every team.
And what are you looking forward to the most about this PLL season? Season, the championship series.
That's a good question, man. I've been explaining this to people. It's still hard for me right now to feel like fully excited. And it's, it feels like it's been an eternity that I've been working. I really recommitted myself this off season. I think mentally to just like, I'm at going into year 8, and it's like, okay, am I winding down or am I just getting started? And, I think that the toll that the Blaze took on me a little bit, mixed with some adversity of kind of going through getting cut from Team USA when, that was something I really wanted. I think I was starting to like, even if it was not so much a conscious decision, I think subconsciously I was starting to put a little bit more of my heart into other things I was doing in my life. And this offseason, just after last year, I think I really had kind of this excitement built back up. And so, I new diet and kind of new habits around my discipline, the way I was going to approach my life the entire offseason. And so when COVID hit, it was a little bit like, like I just did all of this preparation, and now like, what am I gonna have to wait an entire another year for a chance to play? So that was a bit challenging. So what I'm most looking forward to is just to, I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. It's a cliche, and I know everybody's saying it, but I'm right there as well. And I'm proud of the way I've prepared, and I feel as healthy as I've ever, felt in a long time going into a season. So from all those standpoints, like I'm just excited to see and get out there and see where I'm at. And get to see if all this preparation is going to pay off, and if I'm going to be able to have the type of performance I feel like I can. So that's what I'm excited for, but it's also just, it's so fragile, and I've got a COVID test I have to pass, and I'm in a state where cases are spiking, and, there's other professional athletes at my gym who have gone back to their leagues and have tested positive. And it makes me weary to just like allow myself to fully get excited for this. I think once I'm kind of stepping out on that field for game 1, it's going to hit me like, okay, this is happening. We pulled this off. So until then, I'm cautiously optimistic if I'm being honest.
Awesome. Well, we certainly are looking forward. I'm personally looking forward to watching. I think, it's going to be awesome to see it back on TV and have it. Looking forward to listening to Ryan call it. And I think, we'll all be glad to get some sense of normalcy.
It's going to be like the old Rochester days where you can hear the broadcaster while you're playing. We'll be able to hear Ryan's voice.
We probably just don't even need to do the in-helmet thing. I should probably just yell down and then just have the person just yell right back up. We can do in-game interviews for everybody. Just,
It's amazing.
So I might run that by. I might run that by NBC. Just I'm just gonna yell down the guys. They can just yell back. So yeah, good idea. Good idea, guys. It's inspirational.
Well, we always finish with some quick hit questions. We've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate that. And it's always just so fun to catch up with guys about the good old days, but also about all the different ways that lacrosse has impacted you and the people. And I think that's the most amazing part of this whole experience, and doing these Zoom calls with everyone is like, there's so much interconnectivity, but also all these different relationships and how different relationships have manifested themselves with different people. So I think it's been really fun to do. But with that, what is the best place to play lacrosse for you?
Good question. The best place to play lacrosse for me is got to be Ridley Athletic Complex in Baltimore.
If you could be a professional in any other sports league, I know you talked about your NBA dreams. Would it be the NBA or another league?
Yeah, the NBA for sure.
Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, let's go. The Hawks. Put me out there with Trey. Let's do it.
You wouldn't take another franchise if you could?
I am an Atlanta homer, man.
Okay.
How'd that work out for the first time?
I I mean, what other franchise do I want to go to? No, I wouldn't take another franchise. I'd play for the Hawks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Favorite low-key Atlanta restaurant? Someone comes to town, you're not sending to the glitz to the glam, and don't say Waffle House. You can't cop out with Waffle House. What's your favorite kind of truly local joint?
Sure, great question. I should have known a question like this was coming from you. Okay, so my favorite low-key Atlanta spot. I'm gonna give two, if that's okay.
Okay, of course, yes.
There's one that's called Gio's Chicken, and it is
Okay.
it's attached to a really famous place called Antico's, which is a pizza spot, and they do like Italian style pizza. And it's really small, kind of hole in the wall, really authentic. You know, BYOB, delicious. They have 4 meals that you get to choose from, and that's it. And each one comes with a salad. So that's kind of always been a favorite of mine here. And then more recently, I've been going to. I like Italian. I'm a wine guy. So, you know, I like a good pasta and red wine dinner. And there's a place called Il Localino, which is in an area called Inman Park. And it is, again, I think of it as being a really authentic Italian. You walk in, the owner of the restaurant's massive, man, and he sits in a stool right there. He greets you. He sits next to this huge cheese wheel. And it just has like a really good vibe. And of course, you know, delicious food. And I've had some good memories there. So those would be the two that I would present to you.
Nice. Yeah. There's a famous saying, never trust a skinny chef. So.
Yep. It definitely checks that off.
Yeah. No.
Do you have a most embarrassing lacrosse moment?
A most embarrassing lacrosse moment. So I think I got to go back to high school for this one. The only thing that like jumps out at me when I think of embarrassing. Well, you asked about high school highlights. I get embarrassed anytime anybody sees me in a picture of me from high school, because I just have the gear and just everything. It could not be more off, which speaks to the fact that I just played for 4 years in high school with second bar, and not a single coach or player was ever like, hey, you should fix that. Just shows where lacrosse was at in the South at that time. But I can remember, and this kind of, I've had to learn these lessons of smack talk and the number of times, but I was, you know, there were a lot of football players running around out there that weren't very good lacrosse players. And I remember being in a game and, you know, spinning by somebody or something like that and turning around, kind of like this clip that's on ESPN everywhere, and like giving them a little wave, or I think I like turned and said something. And when I turned back around, the hardest I've ever been hit in my life just got destroyed. I'm jogging. So I get up right away and we turn the ball over. I ignore defense and I'm just jogging towards the box. You know, my sideline's all like saying like, get in on D, you just turned it over. I'm like disoriented, and I get to the sideline, and I just remember their entire bench was looking at me, and I just threw up like all in right in the box. And of course the bench was all just like, Dah! And like, I was just like, that was pretty embarrassing.
I think that's what we call an undiagnosed concussion, Scott.
yeah, it wasn't a good scene at all.
How about
Dear Lord,
best teammate?
That's a doozy.
The best teammate I've ever had. I mean, God, there's a lot of them, but Adam Gittleman stands out to me. I mean, you should see what he does for the Archers right now. I mean, he leads film study. He puts together scouting reports. His impact on our team isn't even close to measured by what he does in the staff. And he's always been a great teammate. I mean, I think if you remember that 2015 season when he wasn't starting, and him and Ryan Young were, you know, on the sideline banging the boards and chirping.
I love it.
But he's matured in his ability to lead, not just, I mean, he had a great season in the cage, and I think he's going to have another one. But the things, the invisible things that he does behind the scenes are, you know, amazing, and I really respect him.
All right, you get one memory that you can keep, top lacrosse memory. You can only keep one. What is your all-time high lacrosse memory?
I can only keep one lacrosse memory. I mean, there's like 3/4 of my life I consider a lacrosse memory. You know, the amount of like traveling.
Sorry, your brain is turned to mush. Everything's gone.
It's just like I tie so many things to lacrosse because so many relationships I have come from it. and things like that. That to me, it's like this wouldn't have even happened without lacrosse. But if I got to get specific, I mean, you can't beat winning a national championship and the uniqueness, like specifically beating the University of Maryland and kind of the moment after the game that I was able to share with my dad. It just felt like it did feel like that was for both of us, not just for him. And I'll end, and this might be a story you guys haven't heard. The story from that championship weekend when we win the semis and we're in the hotel the night before the championship game. And my dad is on like a text chain with a ton of Maryland alumni, and the ex-defensive coordinator, Coach Slavsky, he was the organizer of it and just giving all these alumni updates. Yeah. And the text comes in that was like this article about Team USA hockey in the Miracle year, how they had to beat Canada in the second place game, and they still had to beat Finland to win the gold medal. Well, that year Maryland was unseeded, and they beat Hopkins and then Duke in the quarters and then the semis. And the text was essentially comparing what Maryland was doing, and it was saying, well, like, we still have to beat Finland, but we're so close. And so it was calling us Finland. And we were 18-1, and we were the number 1 seed in the tournament. So my dad, came by the hotel and showed me the text and forwarded it to me. And I read it to the team the night before the game. And again, does that have anything to do with why we won the game? No. But, it resonated, I think, with everybody, and especially with Coach Toomey, who felt a little disrespected. I think Tillman was in the text as well, and Toomey didn't like that. And so after we won that game, Toomey, when he shook Tillman's hand, said, like, a little better, something like, we're a little better than Finland, aren't we? And I had, like, a reporter say, like, yeah, we heard you got your hands on a text message, and, like, it started to become a story. And so, of course, I was like, no, I don't know. I wasn't going to throw my dad under the bus. But I tell the story because specifically, like, it was more than just a championship to me. It was to beat the school that I'd always dreamed of going, and my dad's alma mater, and then to look up and see him in, green and gray striped shirt with, like, the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. So that's a moment that is less about the game and more just about, I think, what that meant to him and I, the amount of time he'd spent with me, loading up the van, driving all over the country, the energy and the effort that both my parents put into me getting recruited. I mean, we had spreadsheets that were, okay, here's the 5 coaches we know, here's every connection they have, and we use that to, like, make a master list. And this wasn't 16-year-old me doing this. This was my dad and my mom recognizing the dream I had and putting in a lot of effort for it. So sharing that moment with him, both my parents, but him specifically, after that game, that I think that's going to be hard for me to beat in my lacrosse career, but I'm going to try.
Well, I don't know if you're going to have that till, like, your son, because dear God, I'm getting emotional over here. I don't know about you, Mitch, but
I hear you. But what comes close for me is coaching, is specifically the things I do with Adam and through our foundation, and traveling to places where, like, when I go coach in Europe, it reminds me of what Atlanta was like when I was a little kid. It does exist, and people are familiar with it, but they don't have a respect level yet, and a lot of them don't take themselves seriously yet. So that, is the second thing that jumped into my mind is there, like, one moment from international travel of getting to spread the game? Because I just know the impact lacrosse can have in your life. I wasn't a very confident kid. I was shy in high school, and the sport just helped me to learn how to express myself and how to find confidence, and brought me these friends and brought me these great life experiences. So I just really believe in, that old adage of growing the game, but what it can do for somebody when you give it to them and when you kind of show them the community it invites them into. So, like, that's I think what I'm chasing a little bit now is, and what you guys obviously do such a good job of and have done for so long with Trilogy, is just, bringing the sport to more people and giving more people the opportunity to have what I've had in my life, which, I've got zero complaints, that's for sure.
Well, Rat, thanks so much for spending time. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about paying it forward. Obviously, your dad showed that with you, and now you get the opportunity to do that locally and across the globe. So I really can't say thank you enough for spending some time with us. And it's been awesome catching up and seeing you continue to do your thing on and off the field. So thanks again.
No doubt. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for your patience with Leo. He appreciates it also.
Send him my best and a pat on the head, okay?
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
definitely will. All right.